Hello and welcome back to the awesome wristwatch review channel. And today we're going to do a comparison between the 124060 Submariner in 41 millimeters and the 16610 vintage Submariner in 40 millimeters. The 16610 is borrowed from a friend, and it has been used for roughly 15 years without a service, and it has its fair share of dings and scratches, so do forgive that. So before we go into the various details of the watch, let's take a look at the overall disposition of the watches. As you can see, the vintage watch on the right, the 16610, is holding up pretty well. In actual fact, I would say it looks pretty good for its age, and it looks every bit the Submariner that we know of. And I would say at the fraction of the cost of the latest iteration of the Submariner, it's offers pretty good value for money, right? So now before I go into the details, I shall let you take a look at the packaging of these watches first. So packaging coming right up. Okay, as you can see, the packaging, the latest packaging for Rolex, the box is substantially bigger, and it has this little flap where you can store your materials, and of course it is, I believe, still bound in leather, and it looks substantially more tough or robust. But I think we should not forget that the older style watch boxes by Rolex is nothing to sneer at. It is also leather bound, and the interior is wood lined, and some would say these vintage boxes could possibly stand the test of time better than the newer boxes. In fact, this particular box is 20 to 30 years old, and it's still holding up pretty well. In fact, it's still as good as the day it was purchased. So Rolex has certainly put in a lot of effort in their packaging, and I would say kudos to them. Okay, now the first thing we shall look at today would be the bezel and the dial of the watch. Right, so let me zoom in on this so that we can get a better view. Here we go. Now, as you can see, in terms of the visual aspect from the front, I would say the watches actually look very similar, except that the 124060 has got a slightly broader ceramic bezel that has a very shiny hue to it, while the more vintage 16610 has got a thinner aluminum bezel. But other than that, the bezels are very similar indeed. Here's a closer look at the bezels. As you can see, from a 45-degree angle, the vintage and modern subs have got very similar bezels. In fact, the design language has not altered very much, other than the, as mentioned, ceramic bezel. In actual fact, I would say the vintage sub can hold its own against the modern iteration of the Submariner. Right, and since we are at the bezel, I think it is good to look at the crown as well. Let me get a more focused image on the crown. As you can see, the crown is very well executed for both these watches. Sorry about the shake. The crown design has not changed very much, I would say. It is roughly about the same size, and with the same design as well, right? But the crown guards have changed somewhat, as you can see. The older, more vintage crown guards are more pointy and smaller, while the newer crown guards are more broad to suit the broader case. Alright, now on back to the dial. Let me just zoom out to show you the dial more clearly. Okay, now back to the dial. As you can see, the newer 124060 have got the supersized hands, as well as hour markers, which are bigger, broader, while the vintage Submariner, I would say 16610, has got a more, can I say, elegant design of their hands and hour markers. They are all smaller, but that actually creates a more visually, I would say, elegant look. Not so in your face, but it all is a matter of taste. So whether you like the more modern look of the dial or the more vintage vibe of the 16610 is purely to personal taste. Right? So both are beautiful. Next, let's take a look at the bracelet. Alright, now in terms of the bracelet, the modern iteration of the sub on the left has got solid everything, solid end link, solid center links, whereas the vintage sub has got hollow end links as well as hollow middle links, as you can see. So they do rattle more and they are not as sturdy, but I would say they still hold up pretty well after. It is still holding up pretty well after so many years. And the class wise, this is where the difference lie. As you can see, the modern clasp is pretty good. In fact, it is, I would say, miles ahead. Many improvements have been made since then, and it is milled from solid chunks of steel. The execution, the opening mechanism with its some ceramic bearings, the fold over clasp is all milled from solid steel, whereas the more vintage one, the 16610, it is from stamped steel. Some would say the weakest part of the watch, but in all honesty, it is still doing its job exceptionally well, in my opinion, and still very, very sturdy. Of course, quality wise, you cannot compare with something that is 20 to 30 years more advanced, right? So both exceptionally well done for their age, and of course Rolex is known for their exceptional quality, and I would love to have this too, right? In terms of the movement, of course, the vintage sub has got the 3135 movement, right, which is known to be a very robust and solid movement, whereas the newer ones have got all the major improvements to their movement, including the chronergy escapement, the silicone hairspring, etc. So there are various improvements to the movement, and if you research the movement, you'll find that the decoration of the movements have changed. In the past, for the older 3135 movements, they are decorated with perlage, whereas the newer movements are satin finished. Right? So that's the various details of these two watches. Let me just put it on my wrist to see how they look. Let me just put it on side by side. Hope you can see it clearly. So on the wrist, as you can see, let me just get it in focus. Yep. So on the wrist, as you can see, a Submariner is a Submariner, I would say. Whether a vintage piece or a modern piece, they still look lovely. Of course, the newer Submariner, some would say it has less of a tool vibe to it because of its shininess of the ceramic bezel. And but the older one has got a more tool vibe with the aluminium bezel insert. But both are still lovely, still fantastic in my opinion. They look great. Right, so let me just take it off for a second. Yep, here you go. The Submariner in all its glory. The 124060 and the 16610 Submariner. Both excellent watches in my opinion, and the whoever owns it will be very pleased with it, I'm sure. Well, I hope you like this comparison video, and as always, thank you for watching. Wishing you a lovely day ahead, and if you do enjoy this, do consider subscribing and liking. It would help the channel a lot. Cheers, ciao.